Hey, what's up, guys? Tim again with the one and only Jakee.
What?
Jakee.
Jakee,
the pal, the bud. Okay, here we are with another how to play Warhammer 40k 8th edition video. Okay, this video we're going to talk about the pregame phase. Okay, it's not technically a phase, but these are all the things you need to do in the pregame. Some of these might be done in the list building phase. Probably should be. We didn't touch on those then. We were talking about only list building. We'll put up here the link to that video.
What's important? It's important to decipher the difference because this part can change from game to game, even with the same list.
In a tournament format, you know, if you bring your set list to a tournament, typically you can change these things between games. Maybe not relics, but psychic powers and that kind of stuff you typically can change. But yeah, if you're playing multiple pickup games in a day, you can change this stuff without any problem. There's obviously no rule against that.
So hopefully by now you picked up your rule book, your codex, an army. You know how to play, at least a little bit.
We're teaching them, Jake. Teaching them how to play.
Oh, I mean, like, you know the... We're teaching them how to play.
I got you.
So you know the basic rules,
right,
which we covered, and now you have a somewhat understanding of maybe a partial list built.
Yep. And if you can reference the video that popped up in the corner if you need to go back and learn about list building. You know, if you're structuring a list, again, if you're playing open play or you're playing an unbound game, you can literally just bring what you want. But as more structure gets introduced and you start playing more games, a little more rigidity to them, you're going to want a written list and all that stuff. So go watch our video on that if you haven't already. So without further ado, we'll start talking about it. Number one, first thing I like to look at after I've made a list, or really typically when I'm making a list, is what Warlord trait I'm going to have working with.
Pick your Warlord.
Yep.
And then
who has to be a character.
Has to be a HQ character, right?
No, just a character.
Oh.
It can be any character in your army. Now, this is as far as Warlord traits are concerned. I believe you can pick any model to be your Warlord. But to give them a Warlord trait, they must be a character.
Okay.
Well, we got the handy-dandy book right here. What's this say about Warlords?
Once you have much of your army, nominate one of your models to be your Warlord.
Yep, so
if your Warlord is a character, it can use a Warlord trait.
Yep, so typically, it is beneficial to have a Warlord trait. In most games, your Warlord is going to be worth a victory point when they are killed, so you might as well get something out of it if your opponent's going to get something out of it, if that makes sense. So, in the main rulebook, when 8th edition launched, everybody in the game had access to 3 Warlord traits. Okay, those are on page 186 in the big rulebook. We're not going to go over them. You can look them up if you need to. Those are still applicable to just about everybody in the game. You can still use them. There are some restrictions to named characters using them, at least in my codex.
Yeah, well, usually when you get your codex, your named characters are stuck with one
your codex Warlord traits.
Yeah.
Which is the next thing we'll talk about. So I have my Astra Militarum Codex again. I have, I believe, 8 different Warlord traits that I can choose from.
8?
It might be more than 8. Might be 12.
I got 6 in Death Guard.
Right, but you don't have different regiments and whatnot. So, let's see. Oh, those are orders. Those don't count. At any rate, whatever number it is, I have different...
Obviously now, each codex will have different Warlord traits, different amount of Warlord traits.
As it goes. And some of them are key to your keyword. So I have, for instance, I have Cadian Regiment, and my Cadian officers or Cadian models cannot take a Warlord trait from one of the other regiments. They can take the Astra Militarum Warlord traits. They just can't take regiment-specific ones.
Yeah, the Eldar probably has some things with the different craft worlds.
They're different craft worlds. Space Marine, with their different chapters, can't take each other's Warlord traits and whatnot. So, the main rulebook has Warlord traits. The codexes will have Warlord traits. The indexes did not.
Nope.
Okay.
And
now, Chapter Approved does.
It has new ones?
For most armies that aren't covered, there are 11 factions covered in Chapter Approved. Not including Blood Angels, Dark Angels, who are coming out in December of 17, which is when this is being filmed.
Demons
Demons come out in January, so they're not involved in Chapter Approved either. So, for instance, here, the Gene Stealer Cult, they have their own Warlord trait. They have their own Relic, and they have some other things, which we'll talk about Relics in a moment. But Chapter Approved is a key resource if your army doesn't already have a codex. And even if it does, it's still something you should pick up for the points cost. And
there's an update Big update for most armies in that.
Right. Now, Warlord Traits, it's also important to note that they can be chosen, which is different from other editions. If you're watching this video, maybe you played 7th edition and are trying to learn how to play 8th edition, they're totally up to you on how you want to choose them. You can roll a dice if you want. Like in the main rulebook, you would roll D3 since there are 3 traits, or you can just choose them, which makes building your list a lot easier if I want to say, okay, my Warlord's always going to have Feel No Pain, and that's what I need him to have.
Right.
Okay? Which is a lot better in my opinion. What else do we need to say about Warlord Traits?
Not much more.
They don't cost any points.
Yep, they're
totally free.
You pick the character, whatever, right? Any model, right?
Yep. Any model can be your Warlord. Wow. Any model can be your Warlord, but only character models can also have a Warlord trait.
It affects them the entire game.
Until they die.
And then every game typically has a Slay the Warlord, where if it dies, your opponent gets worth the victory point.
Okay. So moving on to Relics, okay, because we'll come back to Psychic Powers next.
Yep.
Relics were included in the codexes only. The indexes, I don't believe, had any relics. So that's another thing in chapter approved. Armies that haven't been updated yet via codex will receive at least 1 relic, which is nice.
This is much like a Warlord trait. It can be put on any character. It has to go on a character.
Right.
And there's like codex armies right now have multiple relics. The chapter approved.
And again, some are regiment or chapter or legion specific relics that can only go on a model from that particular legion. Let's see, what am I forgetting?
Typically, named characters can't take relics because
they come with their own sometimes. These also don't cost any points. There are, however, some relics that are associated with an upgrade that costs points. So, for instance, I have one that it replaces a bolt pistol, which is an upgrade I have to pay for. So it ostensibly has a 1 point cost.
Yeah.
Relics are also unique.
Yes.
You can only ever have 1 of a given relic.
In your whole army.
Right, and from what I understand, most codexes allow you to bring 1 relic per army unless you use some type of stratagem to have access to more, which we'll talk about those more when we get to the stratagem video.
Okay.
Anything else on relics?
Nope.
They're just another one of those things, a force multiplier. They won't always win you the game. A little more flavor. There are some very powerful relics, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. Yep. Next thing, Psychic Powers.
All right. So Psychic Powers. This was something that when 8th edition came out, there was no generic Psychic Powers. So past editions, there were tables in the main rulebook where everybody chose the same 12 to 30 Psychic Powers, right? Now, via the index, you have access to Psychic Powers if your army is capable of using Psychers. Okay. Typically, it was 3 in the indexes. Plus, every Psyker in the game knows Smite, which is a mortal wound thing, which we'll talk about more when we get into the Psychic phase and all that.
So, if you haven't looked, if you already built a list, a Psyker would be...
With Psychers in it.
Yeah, Psychers in it. Only ones that can use Psychic Powers are Psychers, which are in your codex or index. It will be denoted inside the character's data sheet.
Right. It's one of their abilities. They can cast 1, 2, 3, and I think some people can cast 4 or 5 Psychic Powers per turn. And we'll get more in depth on how do you do that in the Psychic Phase video. Let's see. So those are chosen before the game. Now that the codexes are coming out, so for instance, I have the Psychona Division, or not Psychona Division, that was an old formation, I'm sorry. Psychona Discipline for my Primaris Psychers and other Psychers in my codex. Let's see. Now, as Chapter Approved has come out, what am I trying to say? 1,000 Suns, they've gotten other upgrades, but they still keep the same Psychic Powers from their index. Or they're surpassed by the Codex upgrades, or updates, rather.
Yeah.
So Demons will have their own Psychic table, Dark Angels will have their own Psychic table, and much like Warlord Traits and Relics, these are free of points cost.
Yeah, you just have to have Psychers.
Have to have Psychers in your army, and you can pick what Psychic Powers you have. So, for instance, I have 6 to choose from, plus I automatically know Smite, as does every other Psyker in the game. And, again, I can roll if I want, or I can just choose them, which makes building your list a little bit easier.
So if you have a Psyker that knows 2 powers, then you can
know what you're going to get.
You can choose 2 out of the 6. and then cast them during the second phase, which we'll go over later.
Right, in another video. So far we've talked about Relics, Warlord Traits, and Psychic Powers. Now there's something that's a little more unique to books that have come out, codexes that have come out. We have our Craft World abilities. Basically, your keyword in brackets typically is going to lead you to have
a bonus.
Yeah, I'm going to say they're keyword bonuses. So, for instance, I have catechins. So if I have a whole catechin detachment, I get certain bonuses tied to having only catechin models. Ultramarines, for instance, they have their chapter tactics. Alpha Legion has their own Legion tactics.
Death Guard Legion has their own Legion tactics. Craft World, Elatok has their own,
which is fantastic,
broken.
Really good. Thanks, GW. No, but that's something that really maybe we should have put in the list building video. But
you mentioned it.
Right. So if you build your whole list, your whole detachment has only one keyword, you get access to these different
bonuses.
Yeah, I'm going to say bracketed keyword bonuses. So it's important to note that. So these are where all your special rules come in, and then that will also affect stratagems later on down the road, and we'll talk about that when we get to the stratagem video. What else can we tell the people about the pregame?
If you looked into your list and built certain detachments, and if you're Battleforged, you'll have some stratagems. There are some armies that have pregame stratagem usage. For instance, most armies have, you can spend a stratagem to get an additional relic in your army.
Yep.
So that's another thing you want to denote pregame. If your army has
a lot of times it helps
capability.
to put that on your list too. That you plan on using 2 or 3 command points to have access to those different things. So that's the pregame setup phase from the player standpoint, from the individual player standpoint. Now we got to talk about what the players together need to do. So when we show up to a game, we'll put out our armies. Okay, typically in here we'll have our table set up with terrain where we're going to play our game, and we'll have another table set up where we can place our armies and talk about what's in our army list. To be up front so your opponent knows what's going on. Okay, so then you need to choose a mission, which there are plenty of missions. There are open play missions, narrative play missions, match play missions. There are 12 new match play missions in chapter approved, and also I want to say 12 to 24 other missions that are narrative based and open play based. You can play any of those in a typical pickup game.
Yeah, besides all the point fixing that chapter approved gives, and all of like the armies that aren't represented by codexes that have special stuff, the new missions in that book are awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun.
And
at least they've seemed fun. I haven't played one yet.
Yeah, you will.
One of these days, I will.
You make a list.
So you check it twice. So you have to pick a mission, and you can do that randomly. You and your opponent can talk it out. You can do whatever you want, however you want to determine that. Then there are deployment types that you have to pick that are in the big rule book. What else? You got to set up your terrain, which is this kind of stuff. Okay, and we'll probably do a video on how to set up a table and whatnot. If not, it's just set up a table that looks good. If your opponent agrees to it, you guys play. If they have any objections, you can agree to change some things or whatnot. Basically, you want to just get the game rolling as fast as you can. You don't want to set up a table for advantage. You want to have it be as neutral as possible.
Yeah.
Let's see. So you pick a mission. You pick a deployment type. Then you alternate deploying, and we'll talk about that in the deployment phase. Other than that, I think that's all you need to do pregame. And it sounds like a lot more than it is. After you play a few games, you'll already know what Warlord trait you want to use, what psychic powers you plan on using. A lot of that stuff will meld into the list building phase for you. At least that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning of the video, it's really nice that you can change some of these from game to game, because some might be irrelevant against some armies.
Yep.
And more prevalent against certain armies. So it's what's nice about what we covered here today.
Well, cool, man.
Cool up top.
All right. I appreciate you guys watching the video. We're going to continue with these how to play Warhammer 40k 8th edition videos. Engage us in the comments below. Okay, we need to know what you think. If there's anything that we missed, anything that we need to explain a little bit better, or totally got wrong, because that can happen. Most important thing is make sure you have your source books, your rule book, your codex, chapter approved if you're so inclined, just so that you know what's going on and things are clear between you and your opponent. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. Make sure you engage us in the comments, like, and share this video with your friends. And stay tuned for more How to Play Warhammer 40k 8th Edition.
Hey, yep. Yeah.